really live within those parameters.
So
and
let's be more specific.
Yes,
the situation would never arise in Zimbabwe where I could go on air and in my mother tongue incite people to come and chop you up because you're Makore and you come from somewhere else. The Rwandan experience.
Yeah, that would happen, but probably to a limited extent because we are all human beings.
Right.
And presenters will presenters will get
chopping up process.
But they would get carried away.
Right.
But I think we are very clear. We, as I'm sure you are aware, had a civil war in the 80s before the Unity Accord was signed between ZANU-PF and ZAPU in 1986. So before that we had a civil war. And I think what usually happens under such circumstances, you learn a few lessons from it. And I think as Zimbabweans, we learned quite a number of lessons from that. So you see that in terms of unity of purpose and in terms of respect, in terms of language and regionalism, we learned our lesson during that period. So we are very, careful to not step on each other's toes that way. So you find that we are very polite. But also, let's be quite clear, in this day and age and with technology, sometimes you just have delaying mechanisms so that when someone goes the other way, and especially if it's live programs and stuff like that, you make sure that those sort of issues are kept away. But in terms of program anchors, they are well trained. They've learned that, you can actually just strike each other like that through, focusing on the wrong elements where you are just trying to build a united country.
Right.
Even with the problems we've had politically, you still see that we do not struggle on the basis of regionalism. Politicians would do that, but amongst ourselves, I think we learned through that. And when you also look at the Broadcasting Authority, it's very clear the type of language you should use. You should not use any language that will incite hatred, that will focus on someone on the basis of their gender, on the basis of their tribe.
Do you in Zimbabwe have a specific body which is there to monitor hate speech? Yes or no, just very quickly. Do you have such a body? Because we have one.
Yes, we do.
Right.
Yes.
So
the Broadcasting Authority of Zimbabwe does that.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to go to the idea of the imposition of the West. What is the content in the sense, what makes you quintessentially Zimbabwean in your programming? Or are the Zimbabwean youth being bombarded with pretty much what's going to be seen in Western screens? What's happening there for those of us who don't know?
Well, the youth being youth and young people, obviously, even if they are not bombarded by it through the television station, they will find it. But that aside, in Zimbabwe, we have a 75% local content policy quota.
75%?
Yes.
Three-quarters of your programming is local content?
It's local content.
Both on radio and on television?
The music we play must be 75% local music on radio. The programs that we screen on television must be 75% local content.
So what was the philosophical underpinning of that? Was this to keep the youth with their smartphones ahead of the game and the great mass of the people without not that much amount of money in the sort of doldrums of the past?
I think to some extent, weirdly enough, it's international practice. If you go to Europe, if you go to America, to Australia, to Canada, you discover that, like Canada, you discover that they have a local content policy, which says that 60% of their content must be from within Canada. Because they are so close to America, they were trying to protect themselves against being bombarded by American content. So I think with Zimbabwe, it was an issue of saying, how do we value what is Zimbabwean? How do we value what the critical elements within our society? And I think coming from a colonial perspective, it was also to say, let's love ourselves. Because we were inheriting a content structure where 100% of the content was foreign. So it was to come in and say, okay, we are now in an independent Zimbabwe. How then do we make ourselves happy with our Zimbabweanness? And you tend to have a lot of resistance. So the best way was also to just find a way of saying, okay, let's put it in our regulations so that we are making sure that the content that we've got on our radio stations, that we've got on our television stations, is more local.
Right, okay, so let's go to the production side of this. What are you doing in terms of the creative process to train actors, broadcasters, anchor people like myself to be ready to take on this huge, because you could be having 75% content, but you only broadcast for 1 hour in a day, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
Indeed, the challenge,
there are many hours in a day.
Yes, the challenge is there. You see that in terms of music, it's easier because we've got a lot of young people that are now into music. Sometimes it's not the quality that you want. It's not the best quality in the world, but the content is there in terms of music. I can actually safely say that for Zimbabwe, you've got the content music-wise.
Right.
Not the best.
And again, music, when you mention music, my mind starts thinking in a certain way.
Yeah.
You were talking about the experience of Canada, America, all these countries. Have we got to the point in Zimbabwe where if I play a hit song by XYZ, that they will get some kind of benefit or profit every time we play it? Or we're just saying that you do have such a policy?
We have a royalty policy.
Right.
Where we pay royalties for all the music that's played. So it means with 75% local content as well, the money we are paying out is going out to local musicians.
And therefore, by extension, one could say that your whole creative industry, the music industry, the theatre industry, we're hearing now about a Harare International Festival of the Arts, which we find very strange because we're saying, you know, in Zimbabwe, they're at war, they've got sanctions, and here they are holding this international festival.
Well, I think that's the international perception. But I can tell you that the media industry is very vibrant in Zimbabwe. Like I mentioned on the music side, obviously there are challenges on the film side. When you are talking about television production, you do have to a large extent that scenario that you were talking about, where you've got a lot of repeats of the local content because you are not able to churn enough content to fill your 24-hour band with fresh stuff. But at the same time, it then means you are always pushing the creative industry to be creative. You are pushing them to come up with new ideas. The theatre industry now is feeding more and more into television. They do their theatre productions, but in most cases you find them recording those productions because they know that there's a demand for this local content. So obviously the industry has not developed to a point that it should develop, but the government has set the tone. As much as we may not be reaching the 75% local policy required in terms of fresh content on TV, but the parameters are set.
But as an academic, as somebody who teaches media and communications, as a result of it, is there the kind of, what we have is the outsider who, the expatriate who says they don't bother to watch local television because of it's such poor quality, because the level of production and the production qualities hark back to the 60s. Is this a legitimate contradiction? Should we fast forward to modern day? Should we sort of doing the Boston Legal, all these sort of American quick shot, a scene for every moment in one's life? Is this what we're aiming for? Is this what you're aiming for in Zimbabwe, or are you saying it'll grow of its own? Maybe
the short answer is to say it's like Nollywood. You have to start somewhere and let it grow and develop. I think that's where we are coming from. So obviously, yes, you are probably looking at a production that's shot with one camera, where you are following someone, but the story is in itself captivating. You know, a lot of people have complained about the quality of Nigerian movies, but guess what? They are popular right across the continent. So there is something to be said for the beauty of local content. It makes you love yourself. It makes you appreciate who you are. As much as, sometimes you are looking at these Hollywood soaps where you see them in funny mansions and, let us see these films where we are walking on our dusty African streets and, we are fighting to make a living out of our resources that we have. That brings us much more closer to home than to dream about, these funny streets that we will never walk, or we only walk when we visit those countries. So I think telling our own stories, getting to know what is the city of Nairobi like, I can only get to know if people in Nairobi are doing something. Otherwise, yes, I will know Hollywood, I will know Sunset Beach, I will know Bold and the Beautiful. But I'll never get to know that 3 hours flight from here, Tanzania looks like this, Kenya looks like this. So as much as, and by the way, also in terms of those regulations I was talking about, 20% of content that's shown must be from Africa. So it means because right. You have this regulation, you also have to go looking for African content.
Right. One last question, because that's all we have time for, sadly. What are the perceptions? You talked about the paved roads, the dusty roads of Kenya. How do you, as a media practitioner, perceive the Kenyan media scene, personally?
Well, personally, I am greatly heartened by what I've seen, in Kenya, by what I have read about Kenya. The developments of the Kenyan media, be it print, be it broadcasting, have been massive. But I think sometimes until you get to come and see it for yourself, you may not appreciate it the way you just do it, reading over the internet, researching here and there. But to actually see the magnitude of the development that's there, I mean, the phenomenal growth, the number of radio stations you have in Nairobi alone is amazing.
Susan Makore, media expert from Zimbabwe, thank you for sharing, as they say in Hollywood, and thank you for coming on the JSO interview.
Thank you very much, John.